By noon, the whole auction yard was laughing at Marcellus Vale. He stood under the white heat of a Saturday sun with grease on his sleeves, a sleeping toddler against his chest, and a bid paddle raised for 50 cars nobody else wanted. Their tires were flat, their windows cracked, their hoods rusted shut, and their engines looked like they had given up years ago. From the VIP balcony, CEO Cashin Rourke threw his head back and laughed so loudly that even the auctioneer paused. To him, Marcellus was just a desperate single father wasting his last dollars on junk. But one of those cars was not junk. One of those cars carried a secret that would change everything. Before the story continues, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people the world underestimates. Marcellus had not planned to become the kind of man people pitied. 3 years earlier, he had worn clean shirts, managed a small repair garage, and gone home every evening to a tiny apartment filled with the smell of dinner and the laughter of his wife, Sarai. Then illness came quietly, like a shadow slipping under the door. Sarai fought hard, smiling even on the days her hands trembled too much to hold a spoon. When she passed away, she left behind their little son, Oren, a stack of medical bills, and one final request written in a shaky note tucked beside his pillow: do not let the world make you bitter. Since then, Marcellus had lived like a man carrying glass in his chest. He fixed brakes in the morning, delivered parts in the afternoon, and took any night job that allowed him to keep Oren nearby. The boy had learned to nap through the clang of tools and the smell of oil. While other children played in bright daycare rooms, Oren built towers out of lug nuts in the corner of his father's garage. Marcellus hated that life had become so hard, but he loved his son with a fierceness that made hardship bearable. The problem was the garage was dying. A new luxury auto service chain had opened across town, owned by Cashin Rourke, the polished CEO of Rourke Motors. Cashin's company bought ads, hired influencers, and promised perfection. Marcellus had skill, honesty, and tired hands. That was not enough. Customers disappeared. Rent went unpaid. The landlord taped warnings to the door. By the time the county auction was announced, Marcellus had only one hope left. He had heard the city was clearing out abandoned vehicles from old lots, and he believed he could strip parts, rebuild engines, and sell enough to save the garage. At the auction yard, people arrived in pressed shirts and sunglasses. Dealers came for quick profit. Scrap men came for metal. Cashin Rourke came for entertainment and tax-deductible donations, surrounded by assistants holding tablets. Marcellus came with Oren on his hip and a folded envelope containing nearly every dollar he had left. He did not look like a buyer. He looked like a man trying not to drown. The first few cars sold cheap. Then came the neglected row at the back, 50 vehicles bundled together because nobody wanted to waste time on them individually. The auctioneer called them scrap, the crowd chuckled, and Cashin smirked from above. Marcellus saw something different. He saw alternators, transmissions, doors, mirrors, seats, wiring, and maybe a few engines that still had one more life inside them. When he raised his paddle, the laughter began. When he raised it again, it grew louder. When the auctioneer shouted sold, Marcellus felt the envelope in his pocket become almost empty. Cashin clapped slowly from the balcony. His grin was bright and cruel. Everyone understood the joke without needing words. The rich man had watched the poor man buy 50 problems. That afternoon, under the daylight glare, Marcellus began towing the cars one by one to his garage with help from an old friend named Bastian Nuri, a retired mechanic whose knees hurt but whose loyalty did not. The work was brutal. Neighbors stared. Kids pointed. One woman shook her head and said the city should not allow junkyards near homes. Marcellus said nothing. He strapped Oren into a shaded stroller, handed him a toy wrench, and worked until his palms blistered. For 2 weeks, nothing magical happened. No miracle appeared. Only rust, exhaustion, and bills. Marcellus stripped usable parts and sold them for small amounts. He repaired 2 cars enough to resell, but the money vanished into rent and overdue notices. At night, he washed Oren's hair in the kitchen sink, fed him soup, and told him stories about brave ships surviving storms. After Oren fell asleep, Marcellus sat alone at the table, staring at numbers that never added up. Then came the car at the end of the row. It was an old silver Meridian V12, covered in dust, with a dented fender and a locked trunk. Most people would have sent it straight to scrap. But when Marcellus opened the hood, he froze. The engine had been modified by a careful hand. Not flashy, not careless, but precise. The wiring was strange. The mounts were custom. Beneath the grime was craftsmanship so rare it made his breath catch. This car had not been abandoned by someone lazy. It had been hidden by someone who cared. Over the next few days, Marcellus worked on it whenever Oren slept. He cleaned the fuel lines, replaced brittle hoses, and traced the electrical system inch by inch. The deeper he went, the more unusual the car became. Behind the glove box, he found a sealed envelope wrapped in plastic. Inside were old registration papers, engineering sketches, and a photograph of a young woman standing beside the same car, smiling proudly with grease on her cheek. Her name, written on the back, was Ivara Solon. Marcellus searched the name and discovered a story nearly forgotten. Ivara had been a brilliant automotive engineer who disappeared from public life after accusing a major company of stealing her safety design. The company had denied everything. The scandal faded. Her prototype vanished. Years later, Rourke Motors rose to fame with a luxury safety system that looked strangely similar to the sketches in Marcellus's hands. His stomach tightened. The old junk car in his garage might have been evidence. The next morning, Cash and Rourke arrived. He did not come in a limo, but in a quiet black sedan with tinted windows. He stepped into the garage wearing a pale suit that looked untouched by dust. His smile was no longer amused. It was sharp. He glanced at the silver Meridian, then at Marcellus, then at little Oren stacking bolts on the floor. The air changed. Even Bastian, standing near the tool bench, stopped moving. Cashin offered to buy the entire lot of cars for 10 times what Marcellus had paid. He spoke smoothly, as if doing charity. He said Marcellus had made a brave but foolish gamble and deserved a way out. For one painful second, Marcellus imagined saying yes. The money would save the garage. It would pay rent. It would buy Oren new shoes, real daycare, maybe even a weekend away from the smell of oil. But then he looked at Sarai's note taped above his workbench. Do not let the world make you bitter. He realized bitterness was not only anger. Sometimes it was surrender. Sometimes it was letting powerful people bury truth because fighting seemed too costly. Marcellus refused. After that, the pressure began. Inspectors appeared at the garage. Suppliers stopped returning calls. A bank representative asked about his overdue loan with sudden urgency. Anonymous complaints claimed the junk cars were unsafe. Someone slashed the tires on the 2 vehicles he had repaired for sale. Bastian begged him to be careful. Marcellus was afraid, but every time he touched the Meridian's engine, he felt closer to something larger than himself. It was not only about money anymore. It was about a woman who had been erased, a design that may have saved lives, and a little boy who deserved to grow up seeing his father stand upright. Marcellus found Ivara's younger brother, Tovan Solon, living in a small town 3 hours away. Tovan was wary at first, but when Marcellus showed him the photograph and sketches, the man's eyes filled with tears. He explained that Ivara had built the Meridian as a working prototype for an emergency impact system years ahead of its time. She had trusted the wrong executives. After her work was stolen and her reputation destroyed, she became ill and withdrew from everyone. The car disappeared after her death, possibly hidden by a friend who feared it would be seized. Tovan agreed to help. Together, with Bastian's steady hands and Marcellus's relentless focus, they restored the prototype system enough to demonstrate it. They filmed the process carefully. They copied every document. They contacted a journalist named Mireia Ansel, known for exposing corporate fraud. At first, she sounded skeptical. Then she saw the drawings, the dates, the hidden modifications, and the matching patents filed later by Rourke Motors. Her expression changed from doubt to fire. The story broke on a bright Thursday morning. By lunchtime, everyone in town knew. The same people who had laughed at Marcellus now watched his garage on the news. The footage showed the dusty Meridian rolling into daylight, its old engine trembling back to life after years of silence. Marcellus stood beside it, holding Oren's hand. He did not look polished. He looked tired, honest, and unshakable. Mireia's report questioned how Rourke Motors had built its empire and why Ivara Solin's name had vanished from the history of the technology she created. Cashin denied everything at first. He called Marcellus an opportunist. He called the car worthless. But documents have a way of speaking calmly while liars shout. Former employees came forward. Old emails surfaced. Toven produced letters from Ivara. The company's investors panicked. Within days, Cashin's laughter became a clip played again and again online, not as comedy, but as proof of arrogance. Marcellus did not become rich overnight, and that made the story feel even more real. Lawyers came. Investigations began. The garage still had bills. Oren still needed breakfast, clean socks, and bedtime stories. But something had shifted. Customers returned, not out of pity, but respect. Mechanics volunteered after hours. A local school asked Marcellus to speak to students about perseverance. People donated tools, parts, and time. The 50 junk cars that had once made him a laughingstock became the foundation of a community workshop where young people learned repairs, discipline, and dignity. Months later, Ivara Solin's name was formally recognized in a public ceremony. Her prototype was displayed not in a forgotten yard, but in a museum of automotive innovation. Toven wept when he saw his sister's photograph beside it. Marcellus stood in the back, holding Oren, trying to avoid attention. But when the crowd turned toward him, he could not hide. They applauded him for saving the car, but he knew the truth was deeper. The car had saved him too. It had reminded him that broken things can still carry purpose. Rust does not erase worth. Silence does not erase truth. Laughter does not decide a person's destiny. Near the end of that year, Marcellus reopened his garage under a new name, Second Spark Auto Works. Above the entrance, he hung a small wooden sign that read, "Every engine deserves one more chance." Parents brought teenagers there after school. Widows brought old cars they could not afford to replace. Strangers drove from other towns because they had seen the story and wanted to support the single father who refused to sell out. One sunny afternoon, Marcellus found Oren sitting inside the restored Meridian at the museum, tiny hands on the steering wheel, making engine sounds with serious concentration. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, turning the silver hood bright as water. For the first time in years, Marcellus felt grief loosen its grip. He imagined Sarai standing nearby, smiling that quiet smile she used whenever he doubted himself. He wished she could see their son. He wished she could see that he had not become bitter. Bruised, yes. Tired, yes. But not bitter. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries for more stories about kindness, courage, and second chances. Special request: comment "Every broken thing can shine again" if you believe no one should be judged by how damaged their life looks from the outside. In the end, Cashin Rourke's laughter faded into scandal, but Marcellus Vale's quiet courage became something stronger than revenge. It became a lesson passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, like a spark in the dark. The world had seen a poor single dad buy 50 junk cars and called him foolish. But Marcellus had seen what others missed. He had seen possibility beneath rust, truth beneath dust, and hope beneath humiliation. And sometimes, that is all it takes for one forgotten thing to change everything.